Hello everyone, Danny here today to talk to you about the audiobook Natural Born Heroes, written by Christopher McDougall, narrated by Nicholas Guy Smith. In this review, I am going to cover the content, the structure, the purpose of the book, and this book has multiple purposes, the job that Nicholas Guy Smith did narrating it, what I thought of the book, and I'll also let you know if there's any mature content that I found in it that I think parents should be made aware of. However, before I get started, if you love audiobooks, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, join me in my audiobook journal. Now to the book. This is far and above, absolutely, positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the most fascinating health and fitness book I have ever read or listened to. And that is because this is not, strictly speaking, a health and fitness book. In fact, the health and fitness content of it, there's one part that I'll talk about a little bit later that I disagree with completely. One part that I am unsure of. But the reason I say this book is so fascinating and not strictly a health and fitness book is it's kind of like a hybrid. So the author, Christopher McDougall, went to Crete and in research of what makes a hero. He wanted to figure out what makes a hero. And he learned about a special mission that took place in Crete where some British operatives and some Crete resistance kidnapped and spirited away a Nazi general right underneath the nose of another Nazi general known as the Butcher. And he earned that title. It's made very clear in the book. So the book starts off telling you about this, and then the entire book is in part a story of how these men pulled off literally kidnapping a British general from the middle of a British encampment and spiriting him across the island and spiriting him away. But it takes a lot of rabbit trails. There are just a multitude of details into all different kinds of subjects throughout the book. It'll be going along telling the story of the kidnapping, and then it'll detour into a bit of a personal story of the author's journey, some of the places he went, his visit to Brazil to learn this special kind of freedom movement kind of training, or to learn about parkour, or to learn about foraging for a healthier diet. Or it may take a rabbit trail into part of the history of the different characters. It's all over the place in the detours. Yet somehow, amazingly enough, the author manages to interweave it in such a way that you never feel lost. You never feel like, okay, this guy has no direction. It never feels like it loses its direction or purpose. I would actually, and I mean this as a compliment, I do not mean this as derogatory in any way. If it wasn't for his name and the fact that they have a guy narrating the book, I would think that the author was female. And the reason I say that is if me and my buddies get to talking and we're deep into a discussion on a subject, someone's telling a story and they take a rabbit trail, 9 times out of 10, when that rabbit trail ends, we're left standing there going, what were we talking about? Wow, what put us on it? How did we get started on that subject? I don't remember. We can't keep track of the beginning, and I know it's a common problem with guys. If we're linear thinking, we were one subject at a time. So if we're talking a subject and we take a detour, we tend to lose our way. Whereas my wife, my sisters, most of the women I know, they rabbit trail all over the place. I mean, they're like a spider web. Their entire story is just a spider web of rabbit trails and detours that somehow manages to stay on point. I've never heard my wife or one of my sisters go, what were we talking about? In fact, if I'm telling them a story and I lose my way and I go, what was I talking about? They're the ones that go, oh, you were talking about this. This is, and they can go back, and which is just amazing to me that their minds can work that way. And the fact that the author was able to do that, to take so many rabbit trails and cover so many different topics without ever losing his direction is just an incredible bit of writing. And he keeps you engaged. This was a book that was hard to put down. When I put the book down, it was because I had come to the end of one of those rabbit trails and not knowing what was coming next. Now's a good time to put the book down because I need to go on to do other stuff. So I'll put the book down at this point. But in the middle of a chapter, in the middle, I was through to the end, and I would listen. It's a 12, 13-hour book, and I could listen for several hours straight without needing a break from the book. It's fascinating. As far as I said, there's one bit that I'm not sure whether I agree with the author or not. The author postulates that heroes learn to lift and move using their fascia, not using their muscles, but strictly using their fascia. And that's not something I've ever heard. That's not something I've ever read. That's a completely alien idea to everything I've been taught. So I actually had to stop the book at one point when he was talking about, because he talks a good bit about fascia and using your fascia to help you move. And I had to stop and bring up Google and do some research into fascia. Nothing that I read contradicted the author's theory, but nothing that I read confirmed the author's theory. That doesn't mean the author's off base. The author may be way on base. That just means there was nothing I could read that could confirm it. And the author, when he's talking about the fascia, doesn't really give any step-by-step, this is what you need to do if you want to train yourself to use your fascia instead of your muscles or tissues. He gives one example of something to do, and it's a special form of a push-up. And the fact that his form makes push-ups easier, I did try it does make push-ups easier, it still doesn't prove his point in my way of thinking. An area where I vehemently disagree with the author is an area where I vehemently disagree with a lot of authors in health and fitness. The author is a true believer. And by a true believer, I'm talking in an almost religious format. And his religion is natural movement. So like any true believer, anything that is not the altar he worships at, he bashes and he condemns. So he bashes and he condemns going to the gym. He bashes and he condemns strength training. He mocks guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He literally mocks Arnold Schwarzenegger in the book. And to me, it's like an Eastern doctor bashing on Western doctors. And you've got Western doctors who will bash on Eastern doctors. And I disagree. I think there's a place for Western medicine and a place for Eastern medicine. And the best way to utilize them is to figure out what their strengths and what their benefits are, and then use them for those strengths and those benefits. I don't disagree with the author that we need to learn to train a natural movement and learn to train naturally. Where I disagree with the author is that there's literally no benefit to going to a gym and lifting weights. I think there's a lot of evidence that there is. And I would disagree anyone who said that, natural movement training was a waste of time. I would disagree with them as well. Narrator does a really good job. Extremely happy with who they chose for their narrator. There was no adult content that I could think of other than some of the atrocities that the Nazis committed, and none of those were explained in a very graphic way, so I know nothing there would have bothered my boys at all. You would have to, in my opinion, have a child who was sensitive, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just some children are more sensitive about that. They have a more gentle soul in them. Someone like that might be bothered by some of the stories, of mass killing and someone getting drugged behind drugged to death behind a truck and different things like that. But it's a thoroughly enjoyable, absolutely amazing book. If you like my channel, subscribe, turn on notifications. If you like this video, hit the like button. But most importantly, no matter what else you do today, make sure that today you listen to at least one really good audiobook. And I highly, highly recommend Natural Born Heroes, written by Christopher McDougall and narrated by Nicholas Guy Smith. Thank you.